Welcome back, guys. This is part 6 of the Metasploit Mega Primer. In this video, we will look at the Espia and sniffer extensions in Meterpreter, and after that we will look at different Meterpreter scripts with ship with Metasploit by default. But before we begin, thanks for all those great comments. Some of them were very encouraging, and this is what, as I've said always, keeps me going. Well, to address a couple of concerns and other things which you had, the first thing is a lot of people have requested me to use other exploits in the demos. Well, your wish is my command, and in this video we will look at client-side exploits as a way to break into a system. Also, many requests for scenario-based hacking, like the victim is behind a firewall, behind a NAT, what do I do? How do I use Metasploit then? Well, we'll take up scenario-based hacking in later videos, so don't worry. This is planned. What I first want to do is ensure that all the basics about Metasploit, the framework, how to even do a little bit of programming of your own using the framework, all of that is first covered. Then many of you have requested for modules development, Meterpreter script development, and exploit programming using the framework. Now, as I mentioned in my first video, we will go through all of this. However, just to ensure we do this in a systematic way, I would first want to cover the basics and then move to these advanced topics. A couple of requests have also come up about going more in detail into Windows systems. Well, what I can do is, after I finish off with the Metasploit Mega Primer, then I can create a detailed primer on Windows security, right? So please keep your feedback coming. As I said, this is what keeps me going. And be rest assured, I read each and every comment you actually go ahead and write on these videos, and I will definitely use them in creating future videos. So having said that, let's start off with the agenda for the video. First, we will look at the Espia extension. Okay. So before moving forward, let's quickly inspect our platform for these demos. So this time I have a Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition, right, as the victim, and I have my usual backtrack machine as the attacker machine. I'm logged onto the backtrack machine using PuTTY, and I've currently run MSF console. So in this video, we will look at how to use client-side exploits and break into a remote machine. This might be a typical case when, let's say, the victim is behind a firewall or a NAT, and you cannot really go ahead and access vulnerable services running on his machine directly. So what you might do is, using some sort of a social engineering, send him a link to a web page which is actually being served by Metasploit. Now, how all that would work? Well, we'll do that here right now. I'll go ahead, use auxiliary modules, and in this case, I will use an auxiliary module called browser_autopron. Let's quickly look at the options. I need to set the local host because this is where the reverse connect, which is once the exploit runs on the victim, will connect back to us. Let me quickly check my IP address. It's 1.7. So set lhost to 1.7. Then let's look at all the other options. SRV host, this is fine. It will basically listen to all interfaces. SRV port, well, just make this more simple and less suspicious to the client. I'll make this port 80. And the URL path, or the URI path, sorry, I'll set to the root URL, right? Now with this, let me go ahead and run the auxiliary module. Now, what the auxiliary module is doing is actually it's going to start a server process which will listen on port 80 and which is also loaded up all these exploits in memory. So when a client, which is a browser, will connect to this port, Metasploit will go ahead and try to exploit that browser using all of these exploits which are being loaded right now, right? Let's just wait for a second. Okay, great. We get the server started and over 15 exploits for different browsers have been loaded, right? So now let's go back to our client. Now let's run IE. Right, and let's type in the URL. Now this URL could be made available to the victim either over email or some other form. So right now what is happening is actually different exploits are being tried on the client machine, right? And if you notice on the Metasploit screen, there's a lot of activity and we've managed to already break in and a Meterpreter session has been started. Now what happens typically in the case of client exploits is that the browser might actually crash or hang and the victim might go ahead and close the browser, right? So because of this, what Metasploit does by default is once it gets a Meterpreter session, it quickly migrates it to another process. This is just to ensure that even if the browser is closed or crashes, we still have access to the remote system. Now in this case, well, nothing has happened. I guess it looks absolutely okay. Anyway, let me just quickly go ahead, close this window, and let's get back to our Meterpreter session, right? Sorry, we'll have to quickly look at the available sessions and then select our Meterpreter session. Awesome. So let me quickly check who we are. Okay, so there's a domain called security tube, and interestingly we have administrator access. Now let's come back here. The Espia module extension can be used to take screenshots. It can be used to record audio as well as use the webcam. However, I guess the recording of the audio and using of the webcam, it's not very stable, right? Because of which currently I do not think those commands are really well supported by the extension. So what we will do in this demo is just take a screenshot. Now what you need to ensure is that the process in which Meterpreter is running should have access to the default desktop of the interactive window station, which is WinSTA0, right? Now this is something we repeatedly told you simply because only in this case would be able to access the victim's desktop, right? So one easy way to do it is to go ahead and hit the get desktop command. Now the good news is that we are actually in WinSTA0 default simply because we migrated to another process which was actually running on the WinSTA0 default as the desktop, right? Great. So couple of interesting things we could do. Let's first go ahead and take a screenshot using the Espia extension. So by default, the Espia extension is not loaded. So we'll use the use command and load the Espia extension. Right? Let's wait for a bit. Awesome. Now you will notice that the Espia command screen grab is available. So let me quickly run this. Great. It's been saved here locally. Because I'm running PuTTY, which does not have a desktop system, right? So I cannot actually go ahead and view it, but great. I mean, one could just go ahead and open this up in some sort of an image viewing software to look at the desktop, right? I'm just hoping that very soon the audio recording as well as the webcam recording would be more stable and we would be able to use it. Moving on, the next interesting extension is the sniffer extension. Now what this allows you to do is actually remotely sniff on the victim's network. So how do we do that? Well, once again, we need to load the sniffer extension because it isn't loaded by default. Once we do it, we get a lot of options. The first thing is to actually look at the interfaces available for sniffing. Now what we are interested in is the Ethernet adapter, and the important part here is usable is true, which is we can go ahead and sniff on it. So let's say I'll start my sniffer, and I think I need to give the extension, the interface ID, right? Should be 1. Now, once the sniffer starts, well, we can wait for a bit and go ahead and hit the sniffer stats command to look at the number of packets which the sniffer has collected, right? And now let's say we've gone ahead and collected quite a bit of packets, then we can go ahead and use the sniffer dump command, give it the interface ID and a local pcap file name in which you want to store, which would be, let's say, victim.pcap. And what would happen is the sniffer dump would go ahead and fetch the pcap file remotely and store it locally on the attacker's machine and name it victim.pcap. Now this file can easily be opened using a tool like Wireshark or T-Shark. Unfortunately, Backtrack does not have a T-Shark with it by default, else we would have just used the command line interface. But you can open this up in Wireshark. Awesome. So once you're done sniffing, you can just go ahead and use the sniffer stop command with the interface ID. Now, one unfortunate limitation is that we are unable to specify the filter expression for the sniffer, right? Typically, these filter expressions are finally compiled into BPFs or Berkeley packet filters, using which we have very fine-grained control on what packets do we want to sniff. Maybe we only want to sniff FTP sessions or telnet sessions or something else. Unfortunately, currently, the sniffer extension does not support filters, so which also limits its use, simply because we'll be getting a lot of garbage traffic like ARP packets, etc., which might not help us further than maybe just knowing more about the network, right? Anyway, it's a very good extension. You could use it. Now, moving on, Meterpreter scripts. So what are Meterpreter scripts? Well, Meterpreter scripts are scripts which leverage the Meterpreter platform and the various extensions available. And they go ahead, use all these APIs and do various tasks on the victim system. So the most important thing is the Meterpreter script actually goes ahead and does task on the victim system and shows us various results. Let's have a look. So if you want to run a Meterpreter script, use the run command, hit tab twice, and all the different Meterpreter scripts which are currently available with Metasploit are displayed, right? So many of them, we'll just take a couple of them to illustrate. The first one I'd like to run is checkVM. What this does is actually checks if the remote server is running on a virtual machine, whether it's a Sun VirtualBox or a VMware server or a Hyper-V platform. Now it correctly detects that we are running on a Sun VirtualBox virtual machine. Now the way it does this is by actually looking at various registry entries, right? The good thing is you can go to the Meterpreter script folders and actually look at the source code and learn how these scripts work, right? Let's run another interesting Meterpreter script called cred collect. What cred collect will do is go ahead and get all the hashes for the different accounts and also collect all the available tokens. Awesome, right? Now let's look at another Meterpreter script. Here is another interesting one called enum_Firefox. What this does is it will actually go ahead, take all the stored data in Firefox, such as some cookie information, passwords which you might store, etc., and actually get it locally on the attacker's machine. So it says Firefox was found on the system, and unbelievably it's data for user administrator, and now it's actually downloading the Firefox password file, database file containing cookies and a lot of other things, right? It stores all of these locally in these directories which it displays, which the attacker can later on open and get all those passwords. Now this is very scary because the admin may have stored a lot of passwords or may even have many cookies to websites and places where the cookie might still be valid. Now using this, the attacker can impersonate the administrator on those sites and can gain privilege, right? So very interesting script. Now couple of other interesting ones. Let's say if you're curious about what applications are running or what applications are available on the remote system, you can hit the get application list Meterpreter script. This might take a bit to run. So the interesting thing is that this gives us a full list of all the installed application, right? So interestingly, we have Microsoft SQL Server installed here. The good thing about that, maybe from a attacker's perspective, there could be a database available which might be hosting some customer data, etc. So the next logical thing would be to actually figure out where the database is located on the remote server and maybe to download it locally, right? So as you notice, there are a lot of other interesting scripts which are there. One of them is called kill AV, which will actually kill all the antiviruses on the system, right? You could actually use the get logged on users, select the -C option to get the SIDs. Now we've discussed what SIDs are for the various logged on users. Also, we could run get local subnets to actually figure out the different subnets available, right? So many such things are possible. Now what we will do is we will reserve many of these other Meterpreter scripts for later sessions where we will talk about actually breaking into systems with Metasploit and doing other fun stuff like leaving behind backdoors. This is where the Met-SVC script comes in very handy, etc. I'll just show you a small demo of local privilege escalation using Meterpreter script. So if you notice, we've broken in as the administrator, but we still do not have system privileges, right? So let's say I use incognito and actually list all the tokens which are available to us, right? So it looks like the system token is also available to us right now, right? Interesting. Let's say now we want to go ahead and escalate our privilege, right? So what we can do is we can use the impersonate token command and then go ahead and use one of these delegation tokens, right? Now, the other interesting thing we could actually do instead of this process is actually run a Meterpreter script called kitetrap OD, right? This is basically based on a vulnerability which was found recently I think by a security researcher called Travis, and this actually causes local privilege escalation. So if you notice, it is escalating, and now we are actually running as NT authority system. Awesome, right? Right, awesome. So we've learned a couple of interesting things about the different Meterpreter scripts. We will revisit the Meterpreter scripts later on as more of part of how to go ahead and do ethical or unethical hacking using Metasploit, right? Coming back to our slides, well, that's all I had in mind for part 6. The good news is we've covered Meterpreter basics, we've covered the different extensions, STD API, priv, Espia, sniffer, incognito, and we've also looked at a couple of interesting Meterpreter scripts, right? For local privilege escalation, killing antiviruses, etc., etc. I would encourage you to try out all these commands yourself in a local setup so that you can gain confidence. Right, so well, that's all for this video. As always, I would really request you to please leave comments behind what you disliked in this video. I promise to get back on your comments, and hopefully I'll see most of you in the next video. That's all. Thank you. Signing off. Bye-bye.